Hey everyone, I'm Connor Boyack, and this is 5 ways to do homeschooling wrong. I was not homeschooled. I am a public school graduate. I went to the public fools system back in the 80s and 90s in California, and my mom apologizes to this day that I wasn't homeschooled. It wasn't really a thing in California back then. She didn't even know about it. But for a lot of reasons, including reading John Taylor Gatto's book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Education, a phenomenal book, my wife and I decided years ago to homeschool my kids. And so now I've written books for homeschoolers. I speak at homeschooling conferences. And what I've learned over the years is there are a lot of ways to do homeschooling right, and there are a lot of ways to do it wrong. So in today's video, we're going to go over 5 ways to do homeschooling wrong. The first way to do homeschooling wrong is force over freedom. What do I mean by this? One of the problems with the government school system is that they have this very authoritarian approach. They force all kids to learn all the same things at the same age in the same way. And it is requiring all these kids to do the same thing as all of their peers at the same time. It's forcing them to learn information that some curriculum committee thought up as being necessary for kids of that age. And it's forcing every kid to learn all kinds of stuff that doesn't really matter to them, that they don't find interesting, they don't have context for in their life, as opposed to allowing freedom of inquiry, allowing kids to learn what matters to them, what they're curious about, what helps them make sense of the world that they're kind of seeing grow up around them, to give them that context in their own life based on their unique circumstances and interests. This is one of the benefits of homeschooling, but unfortunately, many homeschoolers continue to be forced to learn things. Their parents require them to learn things by basically replicating the problems in the public school system within the 4 walls of the home. I think that's a bad way to do homeschooling. It's recreating many of the problems that we see happening in the government schools within the home. That's not one of the purposes, I think, of an ideal home education. We can go much more towards this kind of freedom-based approach, so we should shy away from and reject the forced-based approach to learning. The second way to do homeschooling wrong is to teach what instead of why. Now look, I get it. We as parents hear the why question all the time, and public school parents, they get to just send their kids off to school and let someone else deal with it. But those of us who homeschool, our kids are around us all the time, and so those why questions are happening over and over again, and it gets very hard to answer again and again. And it can be very tempting to just say, okay, hold off, stop asking these questions, just memorize this stuff, just read this stuff, just fill out these worksheets, just learn, what I'm telling you to learn right now. And that's the problem that we see in the public school systems. It is the rote memorization of all kinds of information. It is simply drilling kids' minds with facts rather than helping them understand context should precede content. Before teaching content, before teaching information, kids should have the context, which means asking and answering the why. That is one of the opportunities we have as homeschoolers, is to spend far more time on the context, get into the background, get into the broader issues rather than just go on all the facts. But a lot of homeschoolers get this wrong and clinging to their curriculum and their textbooks and all the stuff that they're doing. They focus on the what, and they focus on filling their kids' minds with information rather than allowing them to understand the context and answer the why. The third way to do homeschooling wrong is related to the second, and that is curriculum over creativity. Now, one of the opportunities homeschoolers have is the total flexibility and freedom that homeschooling affords. In most states, a handful of states do have some heavier curriculum requirements. But for the majority of homeschoolers across the country, we have all kinds of opportunity to be flexible. And yet, too many homeschooling families cling to the crutch of curriculum. They replicate what the schools do that say, learn all these things in this order, in this way, at this time. Here you go. Here's all these worksheets and activities, and step through everything beginning to end. And you're basically outsourcing the educational process to some company or education curriculum committee who decided what your children should learn, in what order, at what time. And that, I think, really undermines the benefit of homeschooling, which is kind of organizational chaos, being able to go wherever you want and learn whatever kind of interests you that day, and go deep when you want, and spend all week learning about thermodynamics as a 9-year-old, if that's something that is really interesting to you, rather than having to go through every step of a curriculum along the way. So I think it's important that homeschoolers realize that curriculum can be a helpful aid, but it should not be a crutch. It should not be a mandate that we make all these kids go through from beginning to end, because we're just replicating the problems from the school system within the home, and we're not allowing our kids to benefit from one of the main opportunities that homeschooling provides, which is its massive flexibility and allowing us as parents to be creative in how we help our children learn, what we expose them to, to and allow them to kind of discover through their own path what interests them instead of sitting them down and saying, here's this curriculum and yay, we're homeschooling because we're doing this at home, right? You don't get to hang out with your friends at the school playground, but you're doing all the same curriculum and all the same stuff just within the four walls of the home. That doesn't reach the level of the impact and benefit that homeschooling can afford. We as parents really need to invest the time to be creative with our curriculum, to allow our children to have the freedom and flexibility to learn about what matters to them. This is a topic I discuss at length in my book, Passion-Driven Education. The fourth way to do homeschooling wrong is to have external expectations over allowing our children to follow a unique path. Now, I have two kids, and as any parent of more than one child knows, we have to parent them differently. They're vastly different. Why then do so many parents try and educate their kids differently, make them learn the same way, the same stuff at the same time? We should honor our children's individuality by allowing them to follow a unique path that suits them, whatever path they're on in life. I don't want to imprint onto my child some template that a company or a curriculum committee has come up with. My child is unique. I don't even want to imprint on my child a template of being a mini-me and, learning exactly what interests me and what my own path in life is. I want my children to discover who they are. As a religious person, I think they have a mission that God has kind of intended for them. I don't want to derail them from that by forcing them down a path that I think is best or some company or curriculum committee thinks is best. So instead of having external expectations of what other people say our children should learn at a particular age, we should allow our children, as homeschoolers especially, to follow their unique path. And this means having support along the way, potentially using curriculum or books as aids and as a resource where possible, but still maintaining maximum freedom. So if children want to, take a left turn and go study something deep that isn't of any particular interest or knowledge to the parents, we should let our kids do that because that may be their future. That may be their career, their mission in life. That may be where they can create the most value. And so rather than making them abide by these external expectations that we or others have for them, we should honor their individuality as much as we can so that they can find their path in life as early as possible. The fifth and final way to do homeschooling wrong is for parents to see themselves as authoritarians rather than as guides. I can't tell you how many parents I see get this wrong. Now, one of the big reasons why homeschooling parents, particularly the moms, get intimidated is because they think that they have to be the authority on all different subject matters, the authority on science and on history and on English lit and everything else, right? And oftentimes these parents are public school graduates. They didn't learn this stuff that well themselves when they were younger. And now they think, oh, I have to, be a subject matter expert on all these different areas so that when my kid is sitting here at the kitchen table, being homeschooled, I have to teach them all the things. That's very intimidating for parents. That's how homeschooling parents burn out and throw their kids back into the public school system where the experts can be educating their kids. That is all wrong. That is totally not the way to homeschool. The way to homeschool is for the parents to see themselves not as authority figures, but as guides. Another way to say that is just see yourself as a good Googler. Like anyone can Google really well and search stuff online. So if your kid is interested in, how snowboards are made or, the business model behind their favorite app or how to code so they can make Minecraft games or whatever it is, you as a parent don't need to know how to do that stuff. You don't need to have the knowledge. You just need to know where to go search for it and help provide those materials and resources to your children. There's an added benefit here as well when parents see themselves as a guide. And that is, I think it's very inspiring for children to see that their parents are still students, that their parents are still figuring it out. It's very intimidating as a child to think that adults have everything figured out. Oh man, I have to learn all this stuff and become an adult and know all the things. And that's simply not the case. We know that's not the case. So why do we project that onto our kids and lead them to believe that we are authority figures and we know all this stuff? Better, I think, for our kids to learn alongside us. When my son comes to me and says, hey, I want to understand, how animation works. I'm not going to sit there and try and pretend I'm an authority on animation. I'm going to say, hey, cool question. Let's go search together. And then I'm empowering him to learn how to answer his own questions, right? Because I'm saying, well, I don't know. Here's how I would go find it out. Here's how you can do the same. That is the purpose of a guide, right? It's not to say, follow me, I know the way. It's to say, hey, let's figure this out together. I have a little bit more experience than you. I know what to watch out for. I know where to go, generally speaking, but let's go on that journey together. there's a lot of opportunity with homeschooling. And even if your kids go to public or private or charter school, there's a lot that you as a parent can do at home to supplement what's done at school or to counteract a lot of the garbage that our kids are being subjected to at school. Everyone can be a homeschooler. This doesn't have to be a full-time thing. Even if your kids go to school, you can homeschool them and still be able to provide a lot of these opportunities to your kids to make sure that they're becoming well-rounded, to make sure that they're not becoming, infected by all this ideological garbage coming out of the schools. We're all homeschooling parents in a way, whether we do it, consistently and full-time, or we just do it sporadically during the summer, during the weekends, in the afternoons, or whatever. It's important, though, to recognize as parents, we have to be intentional about this. We have to deprogram ourselves, those of us who went to public schools, because we were encultured in a certain way of schooling. And if we're not careful, we can kind of subconsciously or unintentionally pass this off to our kids. So very important for us as parents to be eyes wide open about the opportunities that we have and the risks that exist if we're going to proceed down this path and try to educate our children on our own, either full-time or part-time. But this is important. This is a primary function for us as parents. We can't delegate this to anyone else. We can seek support and help from tutors and teachers, or whatever, right? Communities, co-ops, other kids, all kinds of things, mentors. All those things are great aids to us as parents, but it is our responsibility. We are the parents of our children. We're the primary people who should be educating them. And so it's very important that we do this with eyes wide open and recognize that there are some ways not to do this well. We need to be careful of what those are. We need to let go of our bias and our bad experiences and think through, how can I do this optimally for my children? It may be a sacrifice. It may take a lot of time. It may be uncomfortable, right? But it's worth it. It's totally worth it. Now, more than a decade of homeschooling my kids, talking to homeschooling families across the country, I see the benefits that exist when we maximize the freedom and the creativity and honor the uniqueness and individuality of these children. That is how we do education. That is how we honor them as little people, right? Who are on their own journey of life trying to figure things out, rather than forcing on them what we think they ought to know and what everyone has to learn at a particular age and what someone said they ought to know or memorize. We need to discard all of that and recognize that the world is abundant. There's all kinds of information out there. They don't need to memorize it when they're 9 years old. They can Google it later if they need to know that information when they're 30. Instead, we should recognize they're on their own unique path. They are discovering who they are. We don't even know as their parents who they are and what their future, mission or life purpose is going to be. Better than, I think, to make sure that we are educating them and exposing them to information in a way that supports them in that journey rather than derails them from it by putting them on a conveyor belt where every kid is learning stuff the same way at the same age at the same time. We need to discard all of that. That is not how to do education. Homeschooling gives us that opportunity. Let's just rise to that occasion and recognize there are some ways to do homeschooling wrong. There's a lot of ways to do homeschooling right. I hope this has been helpful. We'll see you on the next video.